What if your brain could build an entire vivid universe, completely in the dark? Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into an absolutely mind-bending medical anomaly. It sounds like pure sci-fi, but I promise you, it is 100% grounded in real, hard neuroscience. We're going to look at a strictly scientific, documented case that will literally shatter how you perceive the passing of time. So let's just jump right in with a question that challenges everything you think you know about reality and the ticking clock. Imagine you close your eyes for just 3 weeks of physical time, but your mind lived out a vivid, perfectly detailed, continuous 7-year life. Sounds like a movie, right? But as you'll see, this is a very real phenomenon that scientists have actually analyzed.
Section 1. The scientific problem. Disconnecting the internal clock.
To really grasp this, we have to talk about something called subjective time dilation. This is the big scientific problem neuroscientists are trying to figure out. It basically explains how our perception of time can stretch way, way beyond physical reality. You know that feeling during a car crash or a sudden fall where a 2-second event feels like it's happening in super slow motion? That's a tiny version of it. The big question is, what happens to this time dilation when the brain is completely, totally cut off from the physical world? Just how far can time stretch?
Well, there's a massive difference between the two types of time we experience. On one hand, you have objective time. That's the ticking clock on the wall. It's anchored by physical stuff, sunlight, gravity, physics. But then you have subjective time. That's the internal clock, generated entirely by the neurons firing inside your brain. Usually, your eyes and ears act like sync cables, keeping these two clocks running together. But what happens if you sever that sync? The brain's clock kind of goes rogue.
Think of your brain like a high-powered computer rendering a massive open-world video game. Normally, your physical senses are like an always-on internet connection. They constantly sync your internal clock with the external server of physical reality. But when you're forced entirely offline, like, say, in a deep coma, the brain doesn't just switch off. Without the physical world capping its frame rate, it renders reality at an incredibly accelerated, completely uncapped speed.
Section 2. The 21-day experiment. The case of Clélia Verdier.
This brings us to a really intense, natural experiment. We're looking at the harrowing, true story of a 19-year-old French woman that took place in 2025. Following a severe medical emergency and an overdose, doctors desperately needed to protect Clélia's brain from permanent damage. So they put her into a medically induced coma. They used drugs to suppress the exact part of her brain responsible for waking consciousness. For exactly 3 weeks, her body lay completely still. Her external senses were entirely 100% shut down.
But here is where things get wild. While her physical body was literally frozen in that hospital bed for 21 days, a competing reality emerged. Remember that offline rendering engine we talked about? It went to work. In her isolated mind, she actively lived out 7 entire years of life. In year 1, she experienced getting pregnant and giving birth to triplets. By year 4, she was dealing with the exhausting daily routines of raising kids. And in year 7, she went through the absolute devastation of losing one of her babies.
Now, we have to be super clear here. This was not some hazy, weird dream that just fades away when you wake up. This was a hyper-fidelity simulation. She named her triplets Mila, Miles, and Miley. She felt the intense, authentic physical agony of childbirth, which is a biological process she had never actually experienced in the waking world. She formed deep, genuine maternal bonds with these children. To her brain, this was undeniably physically real.
Section 3. The mind-blowing results. Scaling the speed of consciousness.
When neuroscientists analyzed this case, the measurements completely shattered our understanding of the brain's limits. The time dilation factor here is just staggering. By dividing the 2,555 subjective days she lived in her mind by the 21 objective days she actually spent in the hospital bed, scientists found that her internal rendering engine was running 121.6 times faster than objective reality. Think about that. For every single second that ticked by on the hospital clock, Clélia lived over 2 minutes of complex, highly emotional reality.
To put that into perspective, let's compare Clélia's condition to other states of mind. Normal REM dreaming, or even lucid dreaming, those usually operate at a roughly 1-to-1 ratio with physical time. 10 minutes of sleep usually feels like 10 minutes of dreaming. But Clélia's 21-day coma is an unprecedented decoupling from physical time, a dilation ratio of over 120-to-1, paired with an exhaustively detailed narrative. We have literally never mapped anything like this before.
So how does this actually happen? No magic, no spiritual stuff here, just pure science. We looked at something called the pacemaker accumulator model. Basically, imagine your brain has an internal pulse generator.
High-stakes emotions, like giving birth or losing a child, act like biological adrenaline. They drastically accelerate these pulses. And because she was in a coma, her attentional gate was fully turned inward. There was no external light or sound to distract her, so every single rapid pulse flooded her brain's accumulator. That is what massively extended her perceived time.
We also have to factor in the Bayesian brain theory. See, our brain is essentially a prediction machine modeling the world. Normally, your eyes and ears provide error correction to these predictions, but in a coma, those sensory gates are bolted shut. Clelia's brain predicted a narrative of a full life, and without any external data to tap her on the shoulder and say, hey, no, you're actually in a hospital bed, the brain just ran the narrative without correction. It synthesized all these events into massive memory consolidation in her prefrontal cortex. That is exactly why it felt so insanely real. The real-world result of this is a tragic new clinical concept called narrative grief. When Clélia woke up, she wasn't relieved. She frantically searched for her babies. She had to go through intense psychiatric therapy to grieve for Mila, Miles, and Miley. These were children who only ever existed inside her neural network, but her trauma was entirely authentic, because to her brain, the loss had genuinely, undeniably occurred.
Section 4. The meaning of reality. Waking life versus neural fabrication. This leads us to some deeply mind-bending implications about human existence. There's a quote from the neurological analysis that perfectly captures the shockwave this case sent through the scientific community. The brain's capacity for simulation is revealed to be far more powerful than previously suspected. Think about it. If a lump of biological tissue, sitting in total darkness, can render a simulated reality of joy and pain that feels exactly as real as physical history, it forces us to ask, what actually constitutes reality?
From a strict neurological perspective, we have to face a kinda uncomfortable truth. Our everyday waking life and Clélia's 7-year dream, they're actually both simulations generated by the brain. The only difference is that our waking simulation happens to be tethered to the physical world outside our skulls. We're anchored by photons of light and sound waves. Clélia's reality was untethered, generated purely by her internal neural models. But the machine creating the experience, it's exactly the same machine.
Section 5. The conclusion. The ultimate plasticity of the mind.
As we wrap up this explainer, we have to look at what this means for the future. It appears the human brain holds this incredibly deep narrative template for a full life, just waiting to be deployed as a survival mechanism. But looking forward, the prospect of safe medically induced subjective longevity poses some massive ethical questions. Like, if future technology allowed you to take a pill, go to sleep for a week, and live a beautiful 10-year life in your mind, would you do it? Who would you be when you woke up? The boundaries between objective physical truth and subjective lived experience would permanently blur. I want to leave you with this really provocative thought to carry with you today. If a human mind can construct a flawless 7-year reality, complete with love, pain, and distinct personalities, entirely in the dark, how much of your waking life is just an illusion of time? The clock on the wall is nothing but an arbitrary measure of a much deeper, endlessly powerful human experience. Thank you for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the reality around you.